For years, we were told that the internet is not real life. But in this election, it was. Online influencers, issues, and ideas played a major role in the 2024 election, especially on the right. Those are the words of today's guest, Nate Hochman. We're going to talk today about the state of political discourse and the role that the online right has played in shaping of narratives, framing, and political priorities. There are many naysayers about who say how Twitter doesn't matter, how social media is irrelevant, that you need to touch grass. We disagree. Twitter does matter. We are watching in real time as the political class derives both momentum and fear from the discussions that originate on the internet. Welcome to Contramundum.
The American Revolution, in other words, is never finished. It must always be renewed.
Greater love than this hath no man, than that he lay down his life for his friend.
What if it's not envy?
We must take back our cities, and take back our culture, and take back our country. God bless you, and God bless America.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Contramundum. I'm Andrew Isker, and this is CJ Engel. And below us is Nate Hochman. Thank you for joining us, Nate. How are you today?
I'm good, man. I think the intro read was better the second time, so I'm glad we did it.
That's right. Yeah, this is why we're late.
Yeah,
we won't tell you
eight. People don't even know that was take 8.
That takes me a lot of time to do it. But yes, thank you for joining us, Nate, and watching us fumble a few times.
I hope everyone enjoyed the introduction that I'm taking credit for. It was
the
beautiful.
video.
The video, yes.
Yeah.
All credit goes to me and
all
my minions.
All you, CJ.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, we're here today to talk about how posters are in charge, right? We are the captains now. And I mean, just to start off with right off the bat, I mean, you have the vice president of the United States posting or going on what was he on Hannity, I think, talking about the Ordo Amoris and then posting about it explicitly on Twitter, on X. And it's like, all right, it's too much winning.
Yeah, and he's calling people midwits.
That's right. Yes.
Total anon victory.
Yeah, we won, and we are winning, and we will keep winning. And so it's been great to see. And so Nate, you had a really good thread this week. Well, you have lots of great threads, by the way. And I'd retweet all of them, but then my account would just be a Nate Hochman retweet account. I'd be fine with that, actually.
So with Nate,
yeah,
Nate would be okay
Yeah,
with that too.
yeah, I would take that.
Yeah. That's right. But I mean, this one in particular, just talking about how the internet actually is real life, and the arguments, the ideas, the things that we talk about online find their way into mainstream political discourse. They find their way into the White House. And so it is an exciting time to be alive. So if you don't mind, we can read the thread if you want to read the thread in your own voice. I don't know. We didn't talk about this beforehand.
Nate can read it. I mean,
no, I think you guys should go for it. I think it's better
Nate, before we start, Nate, can you dispel rumors that you run JD Vance's alt account?
Well, people keep saying JD Vance has an anon account. Like JD Vance is the account. Like people keep saying he posts anon things from his account. I think I'm not saying the age of anons is over, but like like anons have made it into the face lord world, and JD Vance is a good example of that.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, it's incrediable.
So, do you want to read this, or should I read it?
I'll read it if no one else wants to. Gary, you want to put the comments up? I want to see what people are saying, other than complaining that we were late. I'm sure. Over there. There we go. Okay, there we go. We weren't that late. All right. So Nate at NJ Hochman. For years, we were told that the internet isn't real life, but in this election it was. Online influencers, issues, and ideas played a major role in the 2024 election, especially on the right. Today's right is more online than the left, and that's part of why it is winning. And so, let's keep scrolling. Let's keep scrolling away there. Okay. Conservative politics used to take place on the airwaves of Fox and talk radio, in established journals and magazines, think tanks, and direct mail campaigns, etc. Now, almost all of that is downstream of the internet. In 2024, the right-wing life world is shaped online. And so here, if you're watching, you can see this graph. And who are these, like the followings of like Trump and
congressional
various
Republicans versus
Okay.
yeah. So it's on Congress. It's members of Congress specifically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So is the top one maybe like
It's a good
House
question.
members and then Senate?
Yeah. So it's, I mean, in general, it's like a Washington Post study where they're basically complaining that like Elon had rigged the rules in favor of Republicans, which he might have. But I don't know who that top person is.
Yeah, it's too bad. Too bad that if he did. Imagine if the roles were reversed, right? Imagine if all of big tech is tipping the scale for
Really
your
crazy.
political party. What would that be like, huh? But yeah, now, I mean, things clearly have definitely changed. But even aside from that, and even say Elon is not rigging the algorithm to help his guys. Let's say that he's not. Or even say that he is. I guess it doesn't really matter. The fact is that this is where politics happens now, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is like the crucible, right? Where ideas are in like embryonic form, and then you elaborate on this in the thread, but right, the ideas, they have their genesis online, and then they filter their way into big time, talk shows, Fox News, all that kind of stuff.
Well, here's the interesting thing. So Twitter definitely is the originator of right-wing politics and their ideas. Is there an online left-wing generator, or is all of that offline? Like I think that's what.
Or is it all just fake? Like there isn't anything organic.
Well, they tried to do this with Kamala. It was a total crash and burn, but they tried to play the game.
But
right?
it wasn't organic in any way.
Of course
at
it
all.
wasn't.
Yeah.
Right. This is one of the funny things. Like when you talk about James Lindsay and Michael O'Fallon, they think we're all getting paid by like Peter Thiel, right?
Yeah.
This is completely organic. This is coming out of our own initiative. We're not getting paid to tweet.
It's
$200. But like that's one of the funniest things about all this is it's totally authentic.
But like Reddit too. I mean, the comment there, like Reddit, and you could, I'm sure Nate, you know this too. Like Reddit is totally fake as well. Like the biggest account on Reddit, it's not confirmed. Almost certainly, it was Ghislaine Maxwell, right? Like the moment
Really?
she went,
I didn't know that.
you didn't know that? Yeah. Oh yeah.
Exclusive news.
Yeah. So like when she went, it was like the biggest or second biggest account on Reddit that had the most updates or whatever. I don't know anything about Reddit. I frankly don't care.
Margaret.
Yeah, I don't really care, Margaret. And but like the biggest account on Reddit that drove all of the traffic and everything else, Reddit went completely silent the day that she went to prison or was hauled away. And I think it's like it was like Maxwell Hill or something like that. It was like barely anon, right? And so it was probably her. And so I mean, just about that, like Jeffrey Epstein's mistress, / collaborator is driving all of left-wing discourse on Reddit. Totally organic, right? Totally real. And so like they don't have anything original or new. It's not like there's these, organic cells of thinkers that have discussion on Reddit or Blue Sky or wherever they are, that then it filters its way up in through their ecosystem. Like that doesn't, it's all top down, right? It's all confabulated. It's all made up. Mm-hmm. So that's what's unique about the right is that, I mean, is there astroturfing? Of course there is. But not really in the realm of ideas, right? The ideas that like, I mean, we'll get to this, but like Springfield, Ohio becoming an issue was not this fake thing, was not something where they like millions of bots were descending upon it. It was people were just furious about it, finding out about it. It made its way all the way up to the eventual president of the United States. So, yeah.
Well, but like, I mean, Twitter, this has kind of been the way it was building up to this in 2016. I mean, Trump was an online meme at first, right?
Yeah.
And like that's the thing. So like
somebody should look into the birth certificate. Like, I mean, it was like a joke for like 10 years. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And things were shaped by Twitter back then.
Yeah.
But now it's dominated by Twitter. I mean, literally you have an administration that is, I mean, even like RFK Jr., even like, people talk about how the right wing is leaning more into health issues.
Mm-hmm. Like, who did that?
That was the online right. That was like raw nationalist.
Ben Braddock. And
it's amazing. And now they're memeing RFK Jr. to the right.
They're not just like Steak and Shake announced that they're going to replace all of their seed oils with tallow, right? Like huge wins on things like this, right? And that's totally organic. It's not like there is, the beef tallow industry is paying Ben Braddock to tweet about stuff, right? Or raw nationalist, right? Yeah, like all the people who keep their own chickens, they're paying raw nationalist. There's a big consortium of all of these people.
Big Tallow's in charge now.
Yeah, Big Tallow. So
the online right is definitely like a major faction in the conservative movement infrastructure now, which is something that, I'm in DC. I know a lot of the sort of conservative establishment types. They sort of scoff and roll their eyes at. It's like totally unimaginable to them that they could have been surpassed by this group of, pseudo anonymous or totally organic, decentralized people with much more right wing ideas than they have. But it is true. It's undeniable for all the reasons you're talking about and much more. There was in a like very online version of the left, like the thing CJ was talking about 2016 and Trump being this very online phenomenon, which he obviously was. What happened in the interregnum was enormous censorship, right? So a lot of these accounts got banned or they got shadow banned or deboosted or whatever. Like there was this huge crackdown, which meant that the left was dominating the online spaces for totally artificial astroturf reasons for a period there. And there was like a discourse during the Democratic primaries in like 2019, early 2020 about how the left was too online. And they kind of worked. Like if you go back and watch like the 2019, 2020 Democratic primaries, the way they're talking, the issue set, like it was all extremely niche, like very online left-wing, like boutique issues.
Need a message.
But it's more top down for the left. Like they have these legitimating institutions that basically filter all of those ideas through and then kind of like project them onto the Democratic Party. That doesn't exist on the right. Like there are astroturfing attempts on the right, but the organic power is so much more powerful than those kind of astroturfed attempts that they dominate online discourse and therefore dominate kind of right-wing discourse writ large now.
Well, and you kind of saw this, the old way of doing things, the old way of like destroying organic right-wing movements in like 2000, was it like 2008, 2009 when the Tea Party was doing its thing, where like that was just organic. Like people were angry about the bailouts and the things that Obama was doing, and what did it turn into? It turned into like Paul Ryan and Kevin McCarthy and like just the same kind of Republicans, National Review type Republicans, the Chamber of Commerce Republicans. Like, I guess we should maybe try to cut spending a teeny tiny little bit, and they weren't actually any different. And so they're able to take something and then they'll astroturf it. They would make all of these various organizations to try to co-opt it and gain control of it. But the online right is not something they're able to play that same game with at all. They're not able to. I mean that, and not for lack of trying. Like it's not like they haven't tried to take control of it. Like you have, with when wokeness was in its heyday, you had all sorts of like grifters and people like this. You'd have people like James Lindsay that are suddenly brought into the conservative and right-wing orbit, and that was all fake. Like somebody's paying these people. Usually like the more they complain about people getting paid, that's a signal that they themselves, they're projecting, they themselves
they
are getting
can't
paid.
imagine people actually doing this because they believe it.
Because they believe in
Yeah.
something and care about it.
They're so saturated in the grift
Yeah.
that they can't imagine that people would actually speak their minds and actually spend energy and be able to influence politics out of the heart. Like this is hilarious, because it's like, this is where and this has been building under the scenes for a long time. I mean, when you think about like the Buchanan brigades in the 1990s, right, leading up to the Tea Party with Ron Paul, this is something that's been festering, but they never had the mechanisms to influence policy until right now. And we have our guys are in Washington. Yeah. And I think that the momentum's on our side. This isn't going away.
Yeah. And I don't think they'll be able to co-opt it the way they think the way they have been able to in the past, like, because they don't control the mechanisms by which ideas have their origin. Right. They don't control, they don't control people like Raw Nationalist or BAP or anyone in the online right that has a major amount of pull. Right. They don't control Martin. They don't control any of these guys.
Well, so one of the things I wanted to talk about, I like one of his tweets. I think it was it's right there on the screen. If you scroll down a little bit there, I'm just going to read it. So what this all means is that a random account can drive a national news cycle. A viral post gets noticed by a big conservative pundit. He weighs in and it becomes a story. That story is the next night's Fox or War Room or Tucker monologue. And the next week, it's a GOP talking point. So, Nate, we all watch this in real time, but there's people viewing us that don't even realize that a lot of the things that they saw on Fox News actually originated within our network. So maybe talk about, maybe give us an example, but talk about the mechanisms of how this works. Because a lot of people, I mean, even someone that watches our show that's, like right-wing adjacent, they don't even realize the extent to which this is true and deeply embedded in our narrative formation.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was first kind of becoming politically conscious as like an 18-year-old and listening to, normie conservative podcasts or something, I wasn't on Twitter yet. And I remember being struck even at the time at how often like the big name guys, Ben Shapiro, whoever, would reference something happening on Twitter or a fight that was happening on Twitter. It's actually sort of weird and foreign if you're not on Twitter yourself, because all of these guys are saturated in it. Ben Shapiro is obviously like a different example than the kinds of people we're talking about. But all of these people, including the sort of establishment conservatives, are now shaped by the conversation online. All of right-wing discourse, for the most part, is in some way, shape, or form downstream of what happens, not just online, but specifically on X. Like, X is a relatively small user base, right? Like, you compare it to Facebook or some of these other dominant platforms, pales in comparison. So when you get an argument about this with somebody, they'll point out like, oh, only X share of Americans are even on X, or even X share of Republican voters are even on X. The thing is, where those Americans get their news from, and specifically, and especially on the right, where Republican voters get their news from, those people are on X. This is where the influencers are influenced, right? So if you're some MAGA grandma in Ohio, maybe you have like a Q Patriot 1776 account or something on X. But even if you don't, you're on Facebook, and the memes and sort of ideas that migrate over from X to Facebook, you see those. And even if you're not on Facebook, you listen to Sean Hannity or Tucker Carlson or whoever, right? Like pick your person that you're watching or listening to, Bannon, War Room. Like, those guys are all on X, and their writers are all on X, and the people who flag their stories for them are all on X. Like, in the Fox newsroom, they're getting their stories every night from like this team of producers and monologue writers and all those guys, and they're like in their late 20s, and all of those guys are on X all day. Like, that's where they get their stories from, right? And that's where they get the sort of framing of the story, the narrative to tell. Like, all of that comes from X. So you don't need people to be on X. You need the people that they listen to be on X.
Yeah. I mean, has this ever happened to you, Nate, where you make I mean, you've made a lot of great posts, so it probably has.
Thank you.
But has it ever happened to you where you find a screenshot of one of your posts in the wild on like Facebook or Instagram?
All the time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. Like, there's few things more gratifying, like just scrolling around and like that's that's me. Like that feels pretty good.
Yeah.
And when it's like not by a friend of yours or somebody you know, it's just out there. That's pretty cool to see.
Well, I mean, like I don't want to take too much credit here, but it is cool to see Heritage American floating around.
Yeah.
Quoted in the media. Like these are things, I mean, the direct access that we have to narrative formation is extremely white pilling.
Yeah.
Even for me.
Even for you.
Even for me.
It's white pilling.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nate has me all amped up.
He does. This is why we had him on.
The first time
Oh,
first
go ahead.
time I like really became cognizant of this was I was like 22, right? Like I was a kid. And
So
I was
yesterday?
just, yeah, exactly. Yes, like 5 minutes ago. And I was just kind of like getting my start in conservative media or whatever. And I had a bunch of super big viral stories that like sort of established me. And it was because conservative media sucks at, like, a lot of conservative media is just like a mouthpiece for the GOP. So
Yeah.
they exist to like boost GOP politicians, right? So nobody in conservative media, with some notable exceptions, was doing reporting on like GOP squishiness or the GOP selling out. Like they would write op-eds about it if somebody sold out, but nobody was doing like investigative reporting. So I did all these big investigative reports about like red state GOPs, how they're all like half of them were Democrats and they're all like in the pocket of big business and that kind of stuff. And I was like a 22-year-old kid. I didn't know what I was doing, but nobody else was writing those stories because the lefty media isn't going to write it because it's like they want the GOP to be more left-wing, and righty media isn't going to do it for all the reasons we were talking about. So I had this thread about, I wrote a story and then did a thread about Spencer Cox, the governor of Utah, who, if you know anything about him, is like parody of like worst possible like red state governor, just egregious on like every notable issue. Like he's actively trying to implement DEI where it's not even that he's just soft on it, and he's like tearfully apologizing to like trans activists because like, anyways, he's a terrible guy, right? And I watched Tucker Carlson the next night, and he puts my tweet up on the screen, and then he just reads the whole thread, and like that's his monologue that night. Like he just reads my thread like word for word, and that's his monologue. And again, I'm a nobody. I'm just a kid, but I had a thread go viral on X, right? Like, and that's a direct line to like at the time the most powerful like right wing talk show host in the country. Like that happens all the time. And you don't have to be established. You just have to have a good thread that goes viral and like you're in the conversation or you're even driving the conversation.
Well, yeah. I mean, in terms of journalism, what the left does is that you'll have these like hardcore left-wing rags, like these tiny little newspapers. They'll do a story on something, on some politician or a scandal or whatever, or whatever event going on. And then it gets picked up by like a middle tier, like Mother Jones or whatever, still very far left and ideological. And then that story then gets picked up by either, big time, news media that's local or even like, the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, like that's how their ecosystem works. So like they do have a good ecosystem and like filtering mechanism to draw like small stories and make them bigger and bigger and bigger and get all the way to the top. And conservative media, you're right, does not have that at all, or at least used to not have that. Now they do, and it's through social media. Right. It's through stuff going viral. I mean, I remember when Daryl Cooper did a long thread about the 2020 election, and that's when he first got big, was when Tucker did the same thing, and he read this probably like 50 tweet thread that Daryl did, and it was really, really good, and it was like, this is just a guy posting, right? Yeah. This is just a guy posting about this, like nobody knows who he is, but it was only the arguments, like the arguments and the framing and the narrative that he was establishing. That's what mattered. And you don't have to be like, I mean, I'll see posts that go like massively viral, right? That have 20, 30, 40,000 likes on them now. And they're accounts that, sometimes they maybe have 1,000 followers or less than that. And they just take off because it's a good post and it says what needs to be said.
Credentials don't matter.
Yeah. Yeah, you're like the only thing that matters is the argument. The
Yeah.
only thing that matters is what you are saying, not who you are. I mean, that's why, like, I don't know if you saw, I'm sure you did, like the these guys chirping about Vance talking about the Ordo Amoris, and it was like, I went to the most
Yeah, exactly.
prestigious conservative evangelical seminary, and all of my professors would laugh at what JD Vance says. And it's like
if you're gonna
I have a PhD.
if you're gonna brag about your ignorance, why are you dragging the seminary through it too?
Well, yeah, but it's like no, like that tells us more about like how bad
Exactly.
these institutions are
Yes.
than it does your own credentials.
Yes.
Right. Actually, your credentials are, if anything, are demerit to
Yes.
the argument. They not only do they not matter, they do matter,
Yeah.
and they're negative
Yes.
because you've been miseducated and taught a whole bunch of garbage.
That's why I said, I'm a theologian and I got my credentials from Yahoo group chats.
Yeah, from the early 2000s and in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
Facebook arguments. Yeah.
And JD Vance is right. So, it's like, who cares? Like, who cares what your credentials say?
Yeah, you just
And
made,
in fact, like the credentialed class.
Perrier shoot through my nose with that one. Yeah, just
Yeah.
got it all over my.
Well, and speaking of Perrier, where's my Perrier?
Well, I brought two for myself. I didn't know I needed to share for the whole class.
We should get into John the Baptist and sharing your second Perrier.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I don't have any neighbor love apparently because I'm not giving my Perrier to him who has need. But
the funny thing about those two theologians too, like who had I went to like the most prestigious conservative, seminary in the country, is like you look at their feeds and they're like the worst, like most libtarded, theologians in existence. Like, come on.
Yeah, the fat bearded guy, Zach Lambert.
You have to be more specific.
Yeah, sorry.
Pronouns in
Zach
bio.
Lambert. That guy has a church in Austin, Texas, and like just brags about all the trannies and gay people and all of that are in his how they love the refugees and the illegals and all of this, and it's like that's disgusting. Like that's it's even worse than the Episcopal bishop or whatever or Methodist bishop that got up on her soapbox with her rainbow stoles and all that. Like that's just disgusting stuff, and you could see why. One of our things that we often talk about here, Nate, is just how what sorry shape did I say it right? Sorry. What sorry shape the evangelical the church is, not just even like all of Christendom, right? Every tradition is completely given over to these ideas, to liberalism. Yeah. And you're seeing now with like the vibe shift that has taken place. They're so out of step. And even just with Vance articulating is so obvious and reasonable, that you should care about your family and your neighbors more than you do the planet and everyone across the globe. That the government should care about its citizens and not people tens of thousands of miles away. Right? That's so obvious.
Yeah.
That is the moral high ground. Yet these people are like, no, we need to have condoms in Gaza, and we need to do what is wrong with these people?
I want to get to the I want to get to the glaring example of all this, because this is just fascinating. Like, let me just read the tweet, but then we can get into it. So one of the most significant examples of this in 2024 was the Haitian immigrant crisis in Springfield, Ohio. The story had been floating around for months with a handful of reports in outlets like Breitbart. But this Captive Dreamer 7 post is what made it a national scandal. This is literally the most glaring, specific example of exactly. And this is the moment too when the Trump lead took off.
Yeah,
was on the Springfield issue.
Yeah,
and it was led by an Anon. It was led by Captive Dreamer 7.
Yeah,
who would have thought 5 years ago that Captive Dreamer 7 would be leading the charge in getting Trump and Vance elected on an immigration issue in rural Ohio?
I did.
And another notable point about that other people have pointed out is up until that point, at least in the general, Trump was talking about the border crisis. Obviously, like that was an issue he's running on,
Yeah.
but it wasn't really like the center of his message. He was talking about inflation. He was talking about Bidenomics and how people can't afford groceries. When the Springfield thing blew up, like for the rest of the campaign, immigration was the message, right? Like that's what he talked about at his rallies. That's what his surrogates were talking about. And they were talking about what was happening in places like Springfield in like pretty what like by the sort of conventional Overton window standards were like radical terms, right? Like the way he was talking about towns like Springfield was right out of, the online right kind of like rhetorical framing. And so it didn't just make the issue like a month-long national news cycle where it was like the number one story in the country for weeks leading into the final stretch of the election. It also shifted the entire right's disposition towards immigration, the way they talked about it, the way they understood it, and the priority that they placed on it in their political messaging. That's the power of what like a bunch of guys with anonymous accounts online can do. It's pretty remarkable. Yeah.
I mean, I just remember what was it? Like a week after the debate or a week after Martin posted this, and just so you know, like Captain Dreamer, he's on his, like during the very many purges under old Twitter, he had like 30 different respawns. And so he's Martin. His name is Martin, right? Or I know him as Martin. I mean, I have no idea what his real name is. And
Dreamer.
He's Captain Dreamer now. And so like I knew that he would have an effect. I mean, obviously not to this level, right? But I knew he and people like him would have an effect because the moment that kind of presaged all of this, and it was kind of the prelude to the vibe shift that happened in the election, was the Rittenhouse trial. And during the Rittenhouse trial, that's when Martin's account first got really big before it got banned several times. Was that trial's going on, and you have the two prosecutors, right? Like the big fat one, but then also Thomas Binger, right? Very effeminate guy, and he on his suit lapel jacket, he would have these like Star Wars pins. And Martin was making fun of the guy's Star Wars pins and like went viral doing it. And the day after he went viral, you watched the trial, and Binger did not have the pins on anymore. So like he was having a material effect on the Rittenhouse trial, and like all of us were I think my account went from like maybe 5,000 to like 10 or 15,000 during that trial, because I was just making memes about stuff going on and talking about it. And so, Martin, he went on the, local Facebook page for Springfield, Ohio, and just scrolled through the comments, seeing people complaining about, hey, my cat has gone missing. My dog has gone missing. Hey, I saw the Haitians cooking somebody's dog on a charcoal grill, and posting these just on his X account. And then like a week later, you hear the president, or the now president of the United States, say in the debate, they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs. And it was like, it was Martin. Martin did that.
I mean, that was the now president of the United States. But the remarkable thing was that at the time, the sitting president of the United States, Joe Biden, like had to answer for it. Right. Like, again, in a matter of like days, like I think it was like 6 or 7 days before Biden was holding like an emergency press conference to talk about Springfield. Right. Like they had to trot out this, totally senile old man who's like 80% vegetable to like mumble through a bunch of like recited words about how, XYZ right-wing misinformation or whatever. But the entire media industrial complex had to go into full-on panic crisis response mode to try to debunk all of this, and the entire Democratic Party infrastructure had to too. So it wasn't just that it changed the right's disposition towards those things, although it obviously did. It put the entire institutional left on defense all the way up to the sitting president of the United States.
Well, even in the debate, like the moderator was like, "Sir, we spoke to the city manager of Springfield, Ohio. He said that's not true."
Well, that's the thing. The institutional media can no longer mediate these conversations. That's why they're so frustrated. That's why in the intro, which I wrote, by the way, you said that Twitter was driving not only the narratives and the momentum, but also the fear.
Yeah.
The Democratic establishment, they're terrified of Twitter anonymous users.
Yeah.
Because we are the ones that are driving the conversation.
I mean, we see this in our own like little niche world too. When like James White is freaking out on his radio show that like tens of thousands of people watch, like this 30 follower anon said this to me today, and like they lose their minds over people making arguments that are better than theirs, and they can't just, well, I'm going to talk to your pastor, I'm going to talk to your boss, I'm going to get you fired. They can't do any of those things. And they have to deal with the arguments. And they can't do it.
That's the funny thing, like about like James Lindsay and the classical liberals. Like we need to not use power and wield force, but we need to change the hearts and minds of the American people. And then when we go and change their hearts and minds, they get very offended.
Yeah,
they are very angry that we are changing the hearts and minds of the American people.
It's all a World Economic Forum plot to bring about Catholic capitalism.
Yeah.
Like,
well, it's not just that the arguments are better; it's that they're more powerful. Right? Like it is that the arguments are better. Like the right has had the online right has been like honing these arguments, steel sharpening steel for like a decade. And now they're finally kind of making their debut, and the left and the establishment right have no idea how to respond to it. But it's also that they're cool. They're cutting edge. They have this mimetic power that these kind of dorky old conservative establishment types have no immune response antibodies to deploy against, right? Like they're getting mocked, they're getting made fun of in pretty devastating ways. And because they don't really have the sort of mechanisms for control that they used to, you can't get them fired from their job. You can't call in the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal or whatever. Like they're defenseless, and which is why they're getting totally dominated.
This is one of the points that I made recently with Neil Shenvi had this post about how, the woke right, the dissident right, or whatever you want to call it, we're using all of these made up phrases and terms, and he didn't know how to deal with it. And that's one of the things that we have is we are very creative in terms of our vocabulary. I mean, this is like, I wrote a...
He doesn't like small-souled bug man.
Yeah, I know. It's shocking.
He is one.
Yeah, but like this is... I talked about this in my response, just a short tweet, but like this is a moment for Carlyle. He would literally, if he wanted to make an argument against this decadent elite in England, he would just make up an entire body of phrases to make fun of them.
Yeah.
It's like, that's exactly what we're doing. We are having, and that's the thing that they hate, is we are having so much fun doing it.
Yeah. Like when the Springfield stuff is going on and I'm like smash and retweet whenever Martin is posting this stuff, I'm laughing and having a good time doing it. And they don't know what to do with that. Yeah. They don't know what to do that. We are like these jolly warriors and doing it for the love of the game, right? Doing it for because we actually have interests. We actually love our country. We actually love our neighborhoods and our families, and we care about them, and we will push these things and fight these battles for that reason alone. Right? Like they have no defense against it.
Yeah.
And the Huffy sort of point and sputter stuff, right? Which is like how you'd shut people down for decades, right? It's not just that you get them fired or whatever. You make these sort of outraged moral indignation noises, and that's supposed to shut everyone down. First of all, like there's nobody left to back you up when you do that. Like we have an army, because all this discourse is happening online, and the numbers and the energy is on the online right side. But secondly, like that stuff has become such a meme. It has become such a joke. Like, and there have been so many memes and online jokes and everything produced about it, that when you're doing that, you're playing right into this thing that everyone makes fun of, right? So even these people who are sort of like opposed to the ideological disposition of the online right, like no, they're not supposed to say kind of stuff like that anymore, because they know that like that's something people make fun of, right? So it's again, it's like the sort of mimetic power of the online right has shifted the discourse as well.
Yeah, it is incredible to watch like that take place, but they can't not do it though, like because they've been trained for decades to point and sputter, and for that to work, and so they keep doing it, and like again, it's like this feedback mechanism where the pointing and, like you said, the pointing and sputtering just gets them mocked even more,
exactly,
and they get turned into a corn cob, and it's great. And so let me keep reading the thread here. Just going back to the Springfield, how it happened. If you spend time on here, the rest of the story. An army of small to mid-sized right-wing anons began hammering the Springfield issue. It went viral. Big names quickly noticed. It broke into the talk shows. Suddenly, elected Republicans were talking about it too. Out of thin air, some anonymous posters had created a gigantic national news story. Springfield was the top story in America for more than a month. President Biden himself was forced to answer for it. 12 days after that first post, Trump announced he was visiting Springfield. So like he actually went, he went there, and like and you knew he was gonna, like, once it started taking off, it's like he's gonna do a rally in Springfield, Ohio, and take political advantage of the issue, right? The momentum is there. Like, people are talking about this, and no one is doing. I mean, and the worst part about it too is the talking points that these people have. What was it called? They like temporary protective status, right? Like they were illegals. They should not have been in the country. But the Biden administration had granted them some special bureaucratic permission to live in the country. And the worst part, and this is the thing that Martin and others brought out, was you had like the guy who had some kind of factory or whatever talking about, the Haitians, they're way better than the people here. They all show up for work and everything. It's so great. And you have all these landlords all throughout Springfield, Ohio, that are like, yeah, we're making boatloads of dough because the government's just giving us all this money here. Isn't it great? And so the local, and so you see, and this is happening all over the country. When you talk about, in the next tweet, Charleroi, Pennsylvania. But I mean, it's the same thing that happened in Minnesota with the Somalis. Is like the local municipalities, all of their, like every single one of them has a chamber of commerce. All the people that have money in the town, that are all real snooty, and they look down on the people of their town. And the federal government comes and says, all right, we're going to settle X number of people from a third world country in your town. And you that own all the the crappy apartment buildings, and you that have all of these different services that you can give, like, you're going to make bank on this. And so they love it. They don't have to, they live off near the country club. They don't live around these people. And they don't send their kids to the same school as them, where 40 different languages are being spoken, and the classrooms are jammed full, right? All the things that people have to deal with, they're not affected by it at all. And so you saw that in the leadership of that town, and it was just disgusting. It was infuriating to watch this stuff happen and see that this is just one data point, and it's happening in city after city after city all over the United States. And people are, everyone sees this happening in their towns or towns near them. Logan Hall. Logan Hall, right? Yeah. He talked about, like, today there was another one, right, in a town in Ohio, like right next to where he grew up, where the same thing happened. Where were they from? Venezuela or something?
I think it's Mauritanians.
Or Mauritanians. That's right. Yeah, Mauritanians. 3,000 of them are dumped on this small town.
This just happened?
Or just, became news today, I guess. And it's like, nobody can do anything about it. Like, if you live in that town, it just happens to you, right? You have no say in this. All of a sudden, all these people are everywhere. They're crashing their cars into things. They're filling up your emergency rooms because they don't have, health insurance. So they just go to the ER anytime, they get a runny nose. And so the emergency room is just clogged full of people. And if you got to sit there for 12 hours now, if you have an actual thing that needs to be seen. And it's like, people are experiencing this all over the country. And the worst part about it is, like, nobody cares. None of your elected officials care. None of your city leaders care. Not only do they not care, like, they're actively facilitating this happening to you. Yeah. And you're losing your town, you're losing your country right before your eyes, and nothing is being done about it. It is evil. And
this is just as, if not more, true in, like, deep red Trump country. Like, to your point,
yes.
I mean, Springfield is one example. It's in the thread. It's like the documentary is playing silently. We went after Springfield. We went to Charleroi, Pennsylvania, because we were like, to your point, this isn't just happening in Springfield. It's happening in towns all across the country.
In Alabama.
So we did,
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Alabama. It's everywhere, right? All these small towns. And the sort of especially eerie thing is like it's disproportionately small, like white conservative towns in Trump country. Like that's really where they're ending up. So we went to Charleroi and with like a camera crew and spent like a week there doing like an investigative report, putting together a short documentary on Charleroi. Charleroi is like textbook Trump country. Deindustrialized, southwestern Pennsylvania, once a thriving industry town. Now it's shrunk, has all the sort of pathologies of downwardly mobile white working class America, and is like R plus a million now, right? Used to be more blue collar Democrat, shifted towards Trump. Everyone there is a Trump voter. And it's the same thing. You've got this business there, right? That has like 2,000 employees and like 98% of them are Haitians. Right. And the business owner also owns and has been buying up all the properties in town and converting them into rentals and just stuffing 10 Haitians into a room there. And, one of the things that, we went around talking to all these people who are like good, decent, salt of the earth people. And I don't mean this to sound patronizing, but like strikingly articulate and politically aware of what was happening. Right. Like they understood the political dynamics very, very well. They knew the sort of legal dynamics. They had a much better like meta understanding of what was happening to their town and to their country than like most elected Republicans did. And one of the things we heard time and time again is it's like, it's not just that you import all of these problems, right? You import Haitians, you get Haitian problems. It's also that like they're completely uninterested in assimilating, right? They came there to be Haitians and to have a sort of little Haiti in your town. So they run all of these shops, which they've like bought up, and white Americans aren't welcome there. Like there was a whole controversy over like they had a no whites allowed sign in front of one of the in front of one of the shops. But like that's like that's one example. But like even on a more meta level, it's like the kids in the school, like they speak their own language. They don't hang out with like the native kids. They run their own shops. They have their own parties. They go to their own events. And like, basically you just have large swaths of this little town now, which are like not American anymore. There's no intermingling. They walk past each other on the town street. They don't say hi to one another. Like it's a completely different, like it's two societies living side by side with one another. So the whole fantasy
America
of
is just an
assimilation
idea.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. Like they all found like a copy of the Federalist Papers lying on the ground of Port-au-Prince and,
Yeah, that's right.
I got to get a charger. My Mac's going to die. I'll be right back.
Yeah. And that is like, I mean, I saw this happen in my own hometown, and I don't know if Gary, if you want to pull up Grey Duck's comments, there on the comments, right there, right. My town, Waseca, Minnesota. Right. He's like, the former mayor of Waseca told me that the Somalis defecated in their bathtubs. And I've heard the same stories. And they were resettled without any attempt at assimilating them. Most of them, they went to ESL classes when we were in high school with them, but I mean, they all congregated together. There was there's no incentive for them to assimilate.
Yeah. You can't expect them to either.
No,
like you can't be surprised at that.
No,
the purpose of bringing them in is not to assimilate them anyways.
Not to turn them into Americans. Right. They never were going to. Right. The only kind of assimilation that happens is the assimilation of someone like Ilhan Omar, who just turns into a left wing, whatever. I don't want to say any bad words on the podcast, but like it's just disgusting, right? And so you see this and Nate, I'll let you comment on this when he gets back here, but it's like clear that Mayorkas, right, the former head of the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, an NGO dedicated to importing millions of third world people into America, like he was actively targeting conservative red state small cities to deposit these people in and do this to their towns. Like this was demographic warfare that was being waged on the American people. And I mean, and if you think about it, Nate, too, like just even in like 2015, when Trump makes, illegal immigration an issue. Like in the 2012 election, you had like Tom Tancredo run on this issue, and he got like nowhere. I mean, he was an immigration hardliner, but it was just considered like de facto racist. If you cared about this issue at all, you're probably a member of the Ku Klux Klan or a secret neo-Nazi or something. And what Trump did, I mean, it was like he said the kind of stuff that the working class people I grew up with and around and among just implicitly understood. And when he gives the speech and he says, Mexico, they're bringing rapists, drug murderers, and or murderers, drug dealers, and some I assume are good people. Like when he says that, everyone is like, yes, this is what has been going on forever. And suddenly the Overton window shifts and people are able to talk about it once again. And from there, then the online right just picks up steam on this issue more than anything else. And and we've reached the point now where it's like, no, you could talk about it in these terms. That no, this is demographic warfare being waged on the American people. None of us have asked for this. They're doing it to us because they hate us.
This is the other thing that's important. It's not just that we're picking and prioritizing certain issues, but we're also setting the framing.
Yes.
We're choosing the vocabulary and the phrasing by which these ideas are communicated.
Yeah,
I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, to call it an invasion, that it's an invasion.
Yes.
It isn't just, oh, well, these are, refugees that are looking for a better life. It's like, no, millions of people are coming here on purpose to steal, to kill, to rape, to destroy, and they are letting them do it.
Well, they're also facilitating it. Somebody's paying the bills.
They're making it happen.
Yes.
Right. The fact, and you bring this up with the Rufo point, right? We were joined by big voices like at Real Chris Rufo, whose investigative reporting helped to expose the NGOs driving the refugee crisis in towns like Charleroi. Just a few months later, both Springfield and Charleroi were cited by name in President Trump's executive order on refugees. And so, like, this is part of the posters and control thing. Is you had many posters for years talking about the fact that the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, Catholic Charities, the ELCA and LCMS, Lutheran Social Services, like all of these so-called Christian groups that World Relief, which is the big evangelical one, were facilitating the importation of third world people by the million into the United States of America. They weren't just like showing up in like Somalia, for instance, just like getting on going to Addis Ababa International Airport and buying $1,000 plane ticket for Minneapolis, right? Somebody was paying for that, and it was the American taxpayer laundered through Catholic Charities and Lutheran Social Services. Like we were paying for that. George Bush set that up.
Well, that's the other thing that we were going to talk to Nate about is the NGO infrastructure.
And so like there were anons posting about the NGOs that are facilitating all of this for years.
And nobody would have known about the NGO problem if it wasn't for
anons.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And now, right, what's one of the first things that Trump does is he signs an executive order shutting them down completely. And it's like, thank you so much. Like any other Republican administration would never do that, would never touch that, because the weeping and the moaning and the wailing and gnashing of teeth would have overwhelmed them. The PR problem. Oh, you hate the refugees. You hate the immigrants. You hate the widow and the sojourner. And it's like, no, these people do not belong here. They have to go back.
I want to get Nate on this. I was going to say we should have a guest talk about this too.
We should.
But Nate, I mean, I reached out to you actually to have this conversation before we decided to talk about the posting, but the NGOs, what kind of light was shed on the NGOs, and why is that at the crux of the immigration issue?
Yeah, I had a thread about that the other day. Elon quote tweeted it. So it went like mega viral, and it was about like this Trump. There's two Trump executive orders. I don't know what's going on with my camera. It'll focus again. There were two Trump executive orders. I mean, there's a lot more than two Trump executive orders, but there was one that was suspending refugee admissions for a period of time. And then there's the other that suspends all foreign aid with a couple notable exceptions. And the State Department went even further. This is really annoying me. Sorry, tech issues. I think it'll focus again in a sec.
That's right. Your audio sounds great.
All right, fine. I'll just keep talking then. The State Department went even further, where they said specifically they sent out a stop work order to all of the NGOs that they were giving hundreds of millions of dollars to a year to resettle refugees, and also to like literally ferry people up from South America into the U.S. Mexico border. And these NGOs, there's like 10 specifically that work with the State Department. And they get like hundreds and hundreds of millions of tax dollars a year. And these NGOs like exist singularly to subvert U.S. immigration law. Like that is their MO. So the federal government is basically outsourcing the subversion of the laws it's supposed to be enforcing to these gigantic groups, again, to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Some of these NGOs, like the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, for example, they literally have waypoints like in the Darien Gap, all the way down to the southernmost tip of South America, where with like shelter and legal and medical services and this thing they call humanitarian transportation, which is like vans to ferry people up, you know, all the way down from South America up to the U.S. Mexico border. And then when they get to the U.S. Mexico border, they have an army of lawyers there. There we go. Finally, they had an army of lawyers there waiting to basically help them, coach them on how to beat U.S. immigration laws. Like, so it's an
here's what you got to say to qualify as a refugee.
Exactly. And then they are giving them like literally envelopes with cash in it, courtesy of the U.S. Taxpayer, and, you know, debit cards, et cetera, et cetera. And then they've got vans there to carry them into the interior to resettle them in places like, you know, Charleroi or Springfield or wherever. So it's not just these NGOs are like bringing in refugees, right? Like refugee resettlement, although they are doing that. It's that they are ferrying immigrants into the country en masse. And they're almost 100% funded by the U.S. government. Like their their migration budgets, if you look at them and then you compare how much money they get for migration services from the State Department every year, it's like almost 100%, right? So the only reason they're able to be sustained is because of the federal government and especially the State Department. So this Trump executive order, and then credit to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, like them going a step further and putting out the stop work order where they basically said, we're not funding any of your migration refugee stuff anymore. Like that's done. Like it basically makes all these NGOs dead on arrival. That's all it took, because they don't have the money for it anymore. That all their entire budget is coming from the taxpayer.
Which means that the entire time it was purposeful. It was done by political will, and it could have been stopped at any time. It wasn't even a crisis in the sense that they didn't know what to do about it, or they didn't have the capacity or the infrastructure to deal with it.
It's totally manufactured.
But it was totally manufactured, and they were in on it. Yeah, probably taking kickbacks and all kinds of other.
Oh yeah, I mean, people got rich doing this for sure. Alejandro Mayorkas is not hurting for money from his time at the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society.
Well, and when he took office, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say really quickly, when Mayorkas took office, surprise, surprise, the amount of money getting sent to HIAS skyrocketed like 200, 300% from when Trump was in office and you know, he was on the board up until he resigned from his position on the board to take his position in the Biden admin. So it's like a 1-to-1, and then they start getting like a gigantic increase in the gravy train. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, it's like the CEO of Pfizer becoming the head of the FDA. Like this is how our system works. And it's so infuriating, and it's so good to see that things are massively changing. But I mean, how much do you think, I mean, speaking of Rubio, like how much do you think him being selected as Secretary of State has to do with the fact that you know, the foreign policy initiative of Trump is, you know, like to quadruple down on the Monroe Doctrine, to be able to bully all of these, you know, Central and South American countries into taking back their people, and to basically have our way in the Western Hemisphere again. Like, and that's the thing that people have like speculated is like, okay, here's a guy of Cuban descent from Florida, speaks Spanish. Like, I mean, it makes sense. What have you heard? That's
100%. It's 100% part of it. And I will say, like, I'm biased because I know some people who are, you know, high up in the State Department. Rubio is going to surprise some people. Like,
Yeah.
because he obviously has this background as someone who like supported the Gang of Eight amnesty when he was a young junior senator.
Mhm.
I think, to be fair to him, like he came in and got really bad staff. Like you come in as a junior senator who's like young, and someone just hands you your staffers on like a plate, basically, right? So he got a lot of bad advice from bad staffers.
Mhm.
He kind of had, but he also had like a genuine ideological evolution. Like, which is pretty rare for a Republican senator to actually move in the right direction after they get into office. So like, I'm sure you can say like political incentives changing to, you know, to meet the sort of political wins, but like everyone I know who knows him says that like he was really had a very significant and authentic change of heart that took, you know, a couple years to get there post 2016. But like he genuinely thinks there's too much immigration coming into the country, right? Which is like a big shift from the Marco Rubio of amnesty. And what that means is that like he's going to be great on this stuff as secretary, and you've seen that like in the first couple of weeks.
Yes,
and he obviously is someone who has a lot of expertise in South America for obvious reasons. And that's like the State Department, like all of the stuff they've been putting out so far in terms of their statements. They keep saying like our priority as the State Department is ending mass migration. It's notable they're using the phrase mass migration, right? Huge shift rhetorically from talking about illegal immigration. They're saying we want to shut down. They put out a statement the other day. They're like, the era of mass migration is over.
Yes.
Like that is a gigantic shift for the entire GOP and for the State Department, particularly, which has been like the most malignant tumor in the federal government for decades under both Republican and Democratic administrations, has been like almost singularly responsible for facilitating the mass migration crisis, to do a 180 and to actually use its enormous power to interrupt migration flows, to go after the cartels, to, you know, pressure countries into, you know, repatriation agreements. Like that is seismic for the entire issue.
Yeah, this is another thing. Like one of the main points of the 2016 immigration topic was putting a wall on the border and stopping these random individuals from coming over, sneaking over the border. But now we're at a point 8 years later where we're talking about NGOs, we're talking about massive amounts, volumes of money and resources and ferries, like you mentioned. All of these things were not on the table in 2016. And the reason they're on the table right now, of course, is because the narrative and the framing comes from the online. It comes from the online right. We're the ones that exposed this 8 years ago, and nobody knew it was happening. And a lot of people in Washington didn't even know it was happening.
No, they had no idea.
Yeah.
Right. And that's like one example. I mean, you bring up, you know, Daniel Perry here as well. Or Penny rather. Perry was the guy in Texas. But you know, just, you know, thinking about this is, we almost need some time to like reflect on the gravity of the change, not just in Washington and the change from Biden back to Trump, but the change that has happened in the GOP as a whole. That, I mean, 10 years ago, they did not care about these things whatsoever. They just didn't. And not only didn't that, I mean, if they had any idea about it going on, they were majorly in favor of all of it. And so, you know, I was thinking about like the evolution of Rubio too. Like we talked about this when he was first named Secretary of State. Like I was not a Rubio fan at all. But he's surprised me over the last few years, especially because like politics is about loyalty. And he was loyal to Trump when Trump was at the very bottom, when it looked like he's way more likely to go to prison than he is back to the White House. And Rubio was with him like day one, the entire way. And he was one of the few senators talking about the J6ers and what was happening to them. And so it's like, all right, this guy, I think, like, because he during his time when in the Senate, when Trump was president, you could see like, okay, maybe he's being an opportunist. Like he's saying a lot of like pro-family stuff, you know, kind of populist pro-family stuff that looked really good. But it's like, well, Mitt Romney's saying that same kind of stuff too. So can I really trust him? But when the rubber meets the road and he's loyal to Trump at great cost, and it's not guaranteed that it's going to benefit him at all, then you know the guy's for real. Like you can trust someone like that. And that's what I mean, not just in terms of like political machinations in Washington, D.C. and who Trump can trust and all that kind of stuff, but the American people, the voter, right? How do you trust how do you trust a politician? Well, you can't, right? Like, how do you trust any of these people? It's by things like that. It's by seeing what they do, what they actually do, not what they say, but what they do when it's risky, when it doesn't look like they are going to benefit from it. Like that's how you can gain trust from the voter. So anyway, we should keep going on the thread here. The Daniel Penny trial was another huge moment for the internet right's merger with the mainstream. Obviously, this one didn't originate online. It was already a major national story, but online right-wing discourse played an outsized part in shifting the energy around the trial. The flashpoint here, the thing that moved the focus from Penny on trial to the corrupt left-wing system on trial, was Daphne Yoren, the leftist prosecutor. Before December 1st, when the first post went viral, Yoren was rarely mentioned in the news. And when she was, it was positive. That all changed in the first week of December when right-wing accounts began digging into Yoren's history. Clips of her inane statements, examples of her radical record, her extreme racial animus, etc. They racked up tens, hundreds of millions of views in just a few days. Now the prosecution was the story. The first post about Yoren went viral on December 3rd. Within 24 hours, it was on Fox News. A few days later, Republican senators were talking about it. When Penny was acquitted, Bragg specifically complained about the online attacks on Yoren. Again, it's impossible to quantify exactly how much influence the online sphere had over the outcome of the Penny trial. It would be silly to suggest it was the decisive factor, but it did clearly shift the public conversation, and most importantly, it shaped the right's attitudes. And so I think that that's a perfect example of what you're talking about, that it had a material impact on the trial one way or another. Like, we can't quantify it. We can't like poll the jurors like, oh, did you read stuff online? Like that's not what happened. But but the fact that like the media does have an impact on trials. And I mean, you saw this with the Rittenhouse trial as well.
Yep. Where
the media narrative about Kyle Rittenhouse is he went to a BLM rally and just shot random black people, right? Mm-hmm. Like there are deranged libs out there that like to this day still believe that is what happened. Like that he just went and shot a bunch of black people.
Well, it's happening everywhere. It was with the Covington kid, right?
Yeah.
The smiling kid, you know, with the MAGA hat. This is their narrative, their framing doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, or the Jussie Smollett hoax.
Yeah,
like all of these things.
Yeah,
it's done. Like they don't have that power anymore. And not only did they not have that power to like shape the narratives that we can counter, offer a counter narrative that's true and more compelling, but also that counter narrative makes its way into people with power and people with large audiences and can shape how people think about things. Like that starts with just posters posting about it.
Yeah.
Right. People just accounts talking about these things.
So go home tonight and post.
Yeah. Go home. If there's anything you take from
your
this,
patriotic duty.
That's
right. I would never say like the online right changed the outcome of the Penny trial. I think with this broader sort of vibe shift we're talking about, like to me, I'm quite certain that he probably would have been acquitted even without that, because you are seeing this broader kind of meta shift in the political dynamics in the country, which is often driven by online, but it's not like a one-to-one thing where like the online right says something and then it happens in the country, obviously. With that being said, I didn't say this in the thread because it wasn't like publicly reported. So I guess it's like, I'm quite confident that it's true, but it's too hearsay to sort of put in writing. But I knew a guy, so I guess this is breaking news on the Contra podcast. I knew a guy who was in the press pool for the entire Penny trial, and he was in the courthouse every single day. He was like talking to the legacy media reporters or whatever. And the universal consensus amongst all of the reporters, a lot of whom knew Yoren and knew like and had interacted with her before she was a source, was that she was like, they had never seen her like this before. She was totally shaken, completely in her own head because of all of the online, like people making fun of her, people like digging into her background, like people making fun of her wife, like, you know, going at her Instagram or whatever. Like it totally got in her head. Like, and she was apparently, like everyone said this, who like knew her, she was a completely different person in the courtroom for like the last week of the trial. Like her disposition was totally different. She was less confident. She was stammering more, all of that stuff. And again, the universal consensus amongst the reporters was like, that was because of the online stuff. Right. Yeah. So who knows? You can't quantify the attacks, but that plus the fact that Bragg specifically cited the attacks in his like postmortem, where he was like, this was awful. I can't believe they did this, goes to show like it clearly had an effect on the enemy.
Yeah. Well, because I mean, if you think about it from her perspective, she goes, I mean, some of it too is that Trump won. And so things shifted rapidly because of that. But she goes into this trial, I mean, think about where the world was in like when did the penny thing happen? 2019 or 2022?
I think.
Yeah. So think about, or 22 or 23. Think about where things were at in 2022 or 2023. And Bragg assigns her the case to be the prosecutor on it. Like she's thinking, I'm going to be on CNN. I'm going to be on MSNBC. I'm going to be, the New York Times is going to be talking about me. And they're going to laud me as this great hero fighting for racial justice against this evil white man that choked out and brutally murdered this poor innocent what was Michael Jackson impersonator. Like she thought she was going to be the hero. She thought she was going to get a ticker tape parade down Broadway, and turns out like she was going to be mocked mercilessly, actually.
Yep. And
made fun of and shown what a total creep she is, and did not expect that at all. So yeah, I'm sure it had an effect. Right. It definitely did. Like if you're up there, you're a juror, and the prosecutor's blah, 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 stammering through the whole thing. Like, that probably did do something.
Well, and the remarkable thing is like the press was like not willing to run interference for her. Right.
Yeah.
Like, that's the crazy thing is not only did the press not make her the sort of superhero that they had done in situations like this in the past, they totally left her in the lurch. Like, because they were so demoralized. Like, you look, the press coverage of Trump even now is so much more muted and less hysterical. This is true of like every mainstream American institution now. They're clearly demoralized. They clearly don't have the same kind of energy or mobilization of resources. So it was a total inversion of what I'm sure she expected. And that meant that she was like left defenseless against Twitter anons who were going after her.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's the thing. Like, I mean, there was I didn't even talk about this because it doesn't even like matter. There was a hit piece today from Mother Jones about me and others. Like, they led with my quote, by the way. Yeah. About, JD Vance talking about the Order of Morris. And it was so stupid. I mean, it was like, it really one of the dumbest things I've read in a long time. And I've read a lot of dumb stuff recently. And they're trying to say like, oh, the Order of Morris is rooted in something called kinism. And like this person just does not know what she's talking about. and so anyway, like I just look at that and I'm like, I don't care what people who think that you can chop the genitals off a little boy. Like, I don't care what those people think about me. Right. I don't care that they they're calling me a racist. Oh, you want to mutilate the genitals of little kids. I don't care what you think.
I think that's the most powerful point. Like, yes, we have better arguments and stuff.
We don't let them claim the moral high ground.
But we also just don't care. Like when Vance said, I don't care.
I don't really care, Margaret.
Like, that's the thing that they fear. Is the fact that they have no power over us.
Their entire power was they could sit up here with the moral high ground and say, I've got the moral high ground. You're a bad person. I'm a good person.
Internet posters spent years just taking so much heat from mainstream media that their skin is so thick. And I don't think the media is ready for that war because they are cowards. Like that's the thing that's going on too.
Yeah. They don't know what to do.
They're not ready for a battle.
Yeah. They don't know what to do when you don't concede the moral high ground to them.
Yeah.
I mean, just look at the Phil Williams thing with Phil Williams.
Yes.
Yeah. And speaking of Phil Williams, like he got bullied off of Twitter, and then his bosses made him go back, apparently. And then like after the tragedy in Washington with the helicopter and the airplane, like immediately he goes on Twitter and does what Trump deranged liberal reporters are used to doing and saying, see, this was caused by Donald Trump firing all the air traffic controllers or something like that.
Yeah, they're burning.
And his bosses apparently made him delete the tweet, and then he gives an explainer. And he's like, and he gets dragged in the explainer because he's like, well, I was misinterpreted, but really it is Trump's fault. And then so people start dragging him on there. And like, these people are not used to not being in charge.
Yeah.
They're not used to not being able to set the narrative. And when that's taken away from them, they're lost. They don't know what to do. Like, I called you racist. You think that gives you power over me? Like, no, they don't know what to do. It's crazy.
Well, I mean, this is one of the reasons I like going on Blue Sky from time to time, because like they're doing the same thing they used to do on X on Blue Sky, right? They're at the same like talking points and like hysteria and kind of smarmy, like right-wing chuds don't know what they're talking about kind of stuff. All the stuff we used to see from them, from like Resist Libs and Legacy Journos and all those people, but they're just talking to themselves. Like, it's lost all of its power. It used to be like, I know as someone who's also invited more than a few hit pieces in my short time as an adult, right. When in the age when like the left was like still a dominant force on X, like a hit piece still kind of mattered, right? You could say it didn't matter. You could have your friends stand up for you. Like, that's great. But it was still going viral. There were still tons of people in your mentions for like weeks, sometimes afterwards, like posting the hit piece. And like everyone that you ever worked with and worked for, like they saw it, they read it, right? And that kind of, it's a little bit humiliating. It makes you worry, like, X relationship, et cetera, right? When all of those people just leave, they just voluntarily exit and they go to Blue Sky and they're just talking to themselves. Nobody cares anymore. Right? They're the only people who care, and they've lost the power that they had, which is to shape the discourse that shapes the country, to shape like the national narratives. Like, that's gone. And to the point about like, I don't care. It's like, what do you say after that? Right? You say the magic line, you say the magic hate word, racist, sexist, whatever. Right? And somebody says, I don't care. What do you say? Right? What? Okay. Well, you should care. Well, I don't. Right? Like that's the end of the conversation. Like, your magical words don't work anymore. And that's increasingly what we've seen. And I think a big part of that is because of the influence of this kind of discourse, especially online. Yeah.
And you see it, like, it's energized by Trump, right? I mean, I always go back to, I think it was like December of 2017, and some, stupid bozo reporter is like, sir, Ilhan Omar called you a racist. Do you have anything to say about that? And it's a great gift now, but who cares? Like, like nobody cares. I don't care. Why should you care? I don't care what you think about me. Like that person shouldn't even be in our country. Why? Who cares what she thinks? Like, that's the attitude you need to like have, is I don't care what you think about me. And I just go back to it. I mean, I heard, Tucker Carlson speak at one of in his tour when he was in like Reading, Pennsylvania, and I was there for that. And the key point, like, he gave a nice long monologue, and it was, I was getting fired up, right, and nearly ripped my shirt off Hulk Hogan style. And he the key point in it was never, ever let these people, like these disgusting people who believe in evil stuff, never ever let them take the moral high ground or think they can operate from that. And we aren't, right? We've learned that lesson, that these are really bad people, that what they believe is evil, and we're actually what we believe is good. And having the self-confidence to know that no, what we believe is good things. Right. It's what God wants us to believe. We are not going to let you treat us like we're bad people. You're actually the bad people. Like it's almost like schoolyard argumentation, right? Or it's like, no, you're a bad person, I'm the good person. But like, you have to have that mindset in dealing with them. And the thing is, we haven't had that for our entire lifetimes, right? To be able to just say, I don't care what you think, you're bad, and your ideas are dumb, and mine are better than yours. Like, that's all you got to do. That's it.
I want to spend the last couple minutes here talking about the future of online discourse and the fact that we have an open channel into Washington now.
Yeah.
Our views are held in high regard and they're taken seriously by the Trump administration.
Yeah.
What does that mean for us, Nate? Where do we go from here?
Well, only up, I think. I mean, I like, you know, to a lot of people have said this, so it's not like an original insight. Obviously, Trump losing, quote unquote, in 2020 was like disastrous for the country for all kinds of reasons. For the Republican Party, for the conservative movement, for nationalists, patriots, whoever, in some ways, like, especially now, this is apparent as the Trump administration kicks off, like, it was the best thing that could have ever happened. And largely because of online discourse during the Biden administration, like, the entire conservative movement radicalized, right? And that was largely driven by online discourse. Like, everything that you were just saying about how conservatives realized that their opponents were bad people, that they believed evil things, right? Like, that was during the Biden administration when everything got so bad. And online every single day, conservatives were just hammering it. Trans kids, open border, you know, like, you go down the line, persecution of pro-lifers, like the J6 stuff, like just injustice after injustice at an almost unbelievable sort of grievous level that, like, people had never really encountered before. Like, that completely changed the right's mindset. And you see the aggression that the Trump administration is hitting the ground running with now. Like, that's because the right changed. And the right changed because we had 4 years, basically, like the Trump administration, the first Trump administration it was shocking for everybody. Trump supporters, Trump, you know, critics, like everybody, we were in a totally new world. We didn't figure out how to sort of navigate it yet. The left was way more aggressive than anybody, or at least in the mainstream right, like, had really figured out yet. Right. And so a lot of times, like, the right just got steamrolled. And the 4 years of the Biden administration, people had time to digest and process it and have, like, the debates and the conversations, as the Biden administration was just, like, doubling down on all of the pathologies the left exhibited during the first Trump administration. So now we're in power and we're ready to go. And the right is on side. People are reading from the same book. Like, a lot of people in positions of power, like, have changed their own worldview over the last 4 years. And that's because, again, largely of these online tools, even in the age of censorship, like during the Biden administration, like, that stuff broke through enough to fundamentally transform the American right. And now, like, again, I think it's been an exciting couple of weeks, but I think things are only going to get better from here.
That's a white pill, man.
Yes, it is. That's a white pill.
White pilling time.
I mean, I think there are going to obviously be setbacks. There's going to be fights that are to be had. Like, the left is going to, you know, reconstitute in some way and find things to oppose.
Think about how we basically bullied Vivek out of the Trump administration.
Yeah, over Christmas.
Like, that's powerful. You know.
Yeah,
that's another thing that it wasn't in the conversation at all.
But that, like, happened.
We're at the. I mean, even within the right, you know, we have a vanguard. You know.
Yeah, and that I mean, you think about that whole conversation, and who knows what was happening with Mr. Musk, whose site we are happily using right now, but like, they lost, right? They had to dial back all of the H-1B posting, everything. It's like, well, we just want super geniuses. We don't want all of Bangalore to come here. It's like, oh, okay. Well, that's, you know, I can concede that. Like, yeah, we'll take 180 IQ guys that can build rockets. That's cool.
But like, I don't want of them a year. Like, that's what we're talking about, and that's what we'll take.
Why can't they design from India though?
Well, they probably can. That's the thing, you know, like, and they know this. They know they can do that. Like, I don't want, you know, 100,000, you know, code janitors that are making a fifth of what Americans are making coming here, and then having children, you know, birthright citizen children, and importing giant chunks of India, 1 million of them or whatever, every single year. Like, that should not be happening. And we won that debate. I mean, and the signal that we won the debate is that, Vivek is gone. He is sidelined. And so, I mean, all of these things are going to continue to take place. Like, the vanguard, right? We could do a whole episode on vanguardism. The vanguard of the online right is is there. It's fixed now. Like it is a thing that they have to deal with, and they're not going to be able to just get rid of it. I mean, you saw, I mean, Elon buying Twitter is a huge deal in this. Is like all of these guys were constantly getting banned, and so now they're not, and you're able to have the discourse, right? It is happening. And it's not only happening like in a vacuum, like on Blue Sky or something in some like internet ghetto. It is right. No, they're not just talking to each other, and it's not escaping the bounds
Sent to the ghetto.
well, no, like that's what Blue Sky is.
It
And
is.
it's now escaping and making its way, all of our ideas, and a lot of it like in the dark ages of old Twitter. Right. That's what happened. You constantly would get banned, and you'd have to have like group chats on all sorts of different sites and Telegram and things like that, or you just even over texts. And so now it's there, and all these guys, who have accounts that are, 80, 90, 100,000. I mean, if they should be at like 1 million people. But we'll take it.
It's like Mark Hamill, like, he thinks he's part of the resistance, but now he's hiding in his mansion, because he's no longer welcome in polite society.
Yeah. I know. Like people, like, and some of it is like people have permission now to show disdain to these people. That's been a massive change. So I don't know. I think that things will continue to get better, and better in the sense that like our guys will be leading, and they'll lead on whatever issues come up in the next 4 years. And the fact that JD Vance is the obvious next president of the United States, at the very least, the obvious next Republican nominee for the White House, is a huge, huge deal. And that you could see like where he was at in like 2016, and the ideological evolution that he has been on is real. It's very real. And it's the same one. I mean, because I'll have people that'll be like, oh, like JD Vance was a lib and he hated Trump in 2016. And it's like, well, I don't know, man, like 10 years ago, where were you at on things? Like every single, like it can happen to us. Like you go on a journey of self-discovery. Like it happens. I'm different than I was 10 years ago.
If you didn't change over the last decade, like in some ways, unless you were one of this small cadre of people who was like totally ideologically correct in like 2012, like most normal people, they should have changed their political views in accordance with like what happened over the last decade. Like the last decade was insane, right? Like you should adjust your ideological priors accordingly. And with Vance, like the important thing is not just Vance, although obviously it's important. It's his staffers, right? And what the sort of Vivek excising thing showed is that the GOP now is subject to pressures from the online right. So again, when I said like everything's going to be good, like I didn't mean to say like there's going to be setbacks, there are going to be disappointments, there are going to be fights we lose, like 100%, right? There are other factions that exist and are very powerful. But the online right now has the capacity and the manpower and the sort of mimetic power to impose pressure and to change incentives that directly affect the GOP. The GOP now, in many ways, is taking their cues from the space that we're hegemonic in, the sort of online right-wing space. Yeah. And so senators care what people are saying about them on X. Congressmen care what people are saying about them on X. And all their staffers under the age of 27, like they are us, right? Like that. Yeah. So the next generation, like all those guys, if you're a young conservative interested in politics, like you're on X, and more likely than not, like your views are probably pretty similar to the ones that are hegemonic on here. So it's not just that the sort of like standard bearers, the senators, the vice president, whoever is subject to pressures from the online right. It's also that increasingly like it is the online right in those spaces. Yeah. So all of that stuff, I think, portends more white pills than I think I've felt in a while. It's a white pilling time.
It is an exciting time to be alive. Well, before we sign off here, Nate, is there anything that you want to promote? I know there's lots of different stuff you're doing, different organizations you're involved in, and work you're doing. But yeah, where can people find it?
Well, I post everything relevant I do from NJ Hochman, NJHOCHMAN, and my organization, America 2100. It's in my bio. So toss a follow to America 2100 and to me. That's pretty much all I have to plug right now.
Oh, awesome. Well, we had a couple super chats there, Gary, that we need to get to as well, or maybe just one. Just one. Okay, I think it was about anime. A subject that I know so much about. Since the Japanese started making short animes about Trump, it signals that we on the right need to start an anime company and set a new standard for political campaigning in 2029. From a non-reviewer, $10.
That's certainly a take.
Well, I mean, I don't know anything. I mean, I'll leave that to the Zoomers. But yeah, man, like I'm not opposed to it. No kids, like my 12-year-old is like, he's starting to get into this stuff. Like he's familiar with Dragon Ball Z and things like that. Like, and he's doing like, is it the Naruto run where you like put your
question?
Well, yeah. Why am I asking you? Well, you put your arms back like this is how he runs. And so I'm worried, man. I'm worried for my son, but no, it's a big thing among the youths. So yeah, we can do that. I actually, I guess Miyazaki is anime, right, Gary? Oh, he doesn't know. I thought you knew this stuff.
No,
right?
Gary's my guy.
Gary is your guy. Studio Ghibli or whatever. Yeah, that's anime. So I guess I'm an anime guy. So anyway, yes, thank you, a non-reviewer, for that. And there were a couple questions about my book I saw in the chat. I just got a copy of my draft back from my editor, and so I don't know what that means for the time frame, but he really liked it, so that's all I can say. He thought it was he was pumped up about it. So
his editor is not his wife either.
My editor is not my wife. No, she does do some editing though. So we're probably a few more weeks away. I'm sorry. Just like we complain about us starting late.
You're very sorry.
Yeah, I'm very sorry. We start late all the time, and the book is out late. I'm sorry. It is what it is. So anyway, we have all sorts of other exciting news, like the series on repealing the 20th century.
Is, we have a huge announcement on the 14th. February 14th is our announcement, but that's
Valentine's Day. So sit with your beloved at a candlelight dinner and wait for our announcement to come out.
Yes, bring your wife over for the Contramundum Live because we have an announcement to make. But the series that we'll be revealing this month will be called Repealing the 20th Century, and we're going to be going on a nice thematic journey about the destruction of the 20th century and what it meant in terms of the historical epoch.
Oh.
So that's going to be very exciting.
Very exciting. It's I mean, the libs are freaking out about they're repealing the 20s. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. So anyway, that's all we got for you today. Thank you again, Nate, for your time, Nate, here and insight. This is great. Everybody go follow Nate. Everything he does is awesome. So for that, for all of us here, for Gary, the producer, and CJ and me, have a wonderful weekend. Stay peacefully dangerous, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, fellas. That was a lot of fun. Take it easy.